to a lady, it had to be a lady, I truly believe it had to be a lady. And all of a sudden, people started walking down the wing and people started going. And that's when how everything started happening. But I'm still on the plane. I was waist deep in the water for over 8 minutes, 36-degree water, until there's a little tugboat that came in. And you can imagine, the plane went down in 24 minutes, and the plane's going down like this. And there's ferries coming. But this little guy heard the call, the tugboat captain. And he came in, and he had a plan. I talked to him, his name's Scott Kane. His plan was he was going to throw this life rope to this little lifeboat, and he's going to pull this thing out so he can get people out of there. Well, great idea, but he couldn't pull these people across when people sound the wind. So when he threw it, I caught the life rope, I threw it to Valley, she tied it on, he tried to pull it back, and when she started backing away, he just hit the front of the plane. You know, that's not that big a deal, but it shook the plane. When I shook the plane, I took water up my back. And that's when I thought about Titanic. I said, you need that movie, The Titanic, right? That thing flips up and sucks everything down with it. He said, it's time to go. I've got to get off this plane. I've got to get out of here. And that's when I made the decision to swim. And I jumped and swam to the first ferry I could find, which was all the way into the wing. And I don't know how I got there. I think God gives you that strength and that adrenaline to do what you need to do. Because that's what happened. I just don't know how. I had to tell folks, there's kids in this room right now, look them in the eye and say, tell them, one of the biggest lessons out of this is you never know when you have to cash in everything you've learned in life. Either save your life, save somebody's life, or help somebody. Because my parents had enough wisdom to give me swimming lessons when I was a kid. If I didn't have the swimming lessons, I wouldn't be able to swim. See, there's that moment in life when you have to cash in, whether it's biology, English, Spanish, swimming, to save your life. So I got to the ferry, and I couldn't get on the ferry because, hey, like, if anybody knows anything about those ferries, all they're there for is to take people back and forth to Jersey, New York, Staten Island, Liberty, Statue of Liberty. I'm not going to rescue people. But they had this little thing, and I put my backside in, and the guy goes, you got to climb, you got to climb. And I'm like, I can't. But my mother's worst word she hated was can't. And she kept always told us, if you can't, you must. That's how she taught us. You can't do something, you got to do it. So I put one arm up, and I had 2 angels pick my arms up and pick me up on this ferry and just threw me across this ferry. I'm sliding through this ferry now. And I get on this ferry. That's not what the story really is. But I'm still not back to shore yet. But this is where the Red Cross comes in. Because as soon as we got to shore, I went to the Jersey side. And I talked to the guy who put the plane together. This side of the plane went to New York. This side of the plane went to Jersey. I went to Jersey. When we got there, I couldn't walk. I was frozen. And 3 people met me. 2 EMTs, and a guy from the American Red Cross. And that guy from the American Red Cross had his blanket. Now, it wasn't this pretty. It was all wrapped up, but he had a blanket for me. That's why I speak nationally for the Red Cross. They were there the moment I got to shore. They carried me in. These people had to carry me into this triage room. They called it a triage room because it was just a room. But it was where they put people like myself who'd been in the water. And they stripped my clothes off and down to my skivvies, and that's when it started getting pretty wild. Because like 6 or 7 in this room, and there's a naked lady here, and a guy with skivvies on here, I'm on my skivvies. We're all looking around like, what's going on now? There's a lot of stuff going on, right? But they finally took my blood pressure. It was 190 over 120, and they thought I was going to have a heart attack or a stroke. So they got me out of there. And that's when the media hit. And my picture all of a sudden was all across the world. But got to the hospital, 40 people from Palisades Medical Center were there waiting for me. I tell folks, if you're going to go down in Jersey, New York. They know how to handle it. It's unfortunate, but they know how to handle these things. And 10 women picked me up and put me in this room and started taking care of me. Started beating on me. I mean, the guy said, take his vitals. They tried to get my vitals, still 190 over 120. My oxygen level was 75. They said, take his temperature. They took it orally, it was 96. He goes, you got to take it anally. I'm like, what? I knew what he meant. I was like, what? And all of a sudden, they couldn't get my underwear off because they had frozen my hips. That's how cold my body was. So the nurse basically had to cut my underwear off, and my core temperature was 94. So I had a lot of things going on. That's not what the story is. It took them 5 hours to thaw me out, and I had no clothes. Someone in the middle of the night brought me some clothes, even though they were ugly sweats and ugly shoes. Someone from the Red Cross got up in the middle of the night and brought me some clothes. So I could at least do the interviews the next morning. People said, why do you do those interviews on Good Morning America and Early Show? I said, you know what part of the miracle is? 150 passengers on this plane, 2 people stayed the night in the hospital, Barry Leonard and myself. They could find us. Everybody else already gone home or back to the hotel. That's a miracle. Going to a stay the night in the hotel or in the hospital. But it was a wild time to get back to Charlotte. I live in Charlotte. And it was a pretty rocky flight. I have to admit, I wasn't really feeling good about it. I got to talk to the captain. You wanted to talk to me, I wanted to talk to him too. I wanted to find out if he had minor experience. Our captain said, "You want to get me over this bridge?" But I got back to Charlotte, and my wife and family were there. But what was interesting, one of the interesting points about this is, as soon as I landed, not only my wife and family and U.S. Airways were there, but her counterpart in Charlotte, Pam Jeffson, the CEO of the Red Cross, was standing there waiting for me. Taking care of my family. Excuse me, taking care of my family. So it showed me, not only is the Red Cross there when you're going through something bad, they're there to help people when they're going through something bad back home. That showed me the global aspect of the American Red Cross. And that's why I speak now, like I mentioned, all over the country for the Red Cross. But I firmly believe in their mission. And I will finish up here. There's a lot more to the story. I'm going to finish up with one quick story at the end. The story of the Red Cross is around hope, getting hope. And that's why this story, what's happened to me and another 154 other people, it's about hope. That day, if you remember, there's not much going positive in this country. There's a lot of bad stuff, and all of a sudden you have this. And people rally around it, and people, it's the first time in aviation history that people survive, everybody survived a plane crash in the water. And God's sending people out now, like myself, to share this message. There's a lot more to this message. I've been very blessed. This is the 82nd time I've spoken since January. And Brother Lee was right. I spoke in D.C. I told her, "You invite me, I'll show up." And that's how firmly, strongly I believe about this. I will leave you with one quick story. There's a lot of stories I like to share, but I'm going to share with one. And I shared this with somebody earlier. The second time I spoke was in Charlotte to my Methodist men's group. Now, I'm not a part of the Methodist men's group. And I know there's usually a bunch of old guys eating pancakes. So I was like, "Got it, no problem." Right? I show up. But I didn't know they invited the whole community. And they had like 300 people showed up. And they ran out of pancakes. They go to Bojangles. That's another story. When I tell this story, I had basically talked for 30 minutes. I got done talking. And I'm standing here talking to some folks in front. And my minister's standing right here. And all of a sudden, there's this lady. She's about 80, 85 years old. Straight ahead of me. She must have a lot of power. But she's like part of the Red Sea. And she parked, all these men stand, she parks right in the middle of them. And she grabs my arm. And I'm looking at her, and I'm like, everybody's looking at her, but we don't know this lady from Adam. She looks me in the eyes, and I was questioning if there was a God, and I didn't believe in miracles, but your physical evidence of both. She starts crying and says, "Thank you." And she turns and walks away. Never to be seen again. And these people are crying, I'm welling up, my minister's looking at me, I'm looking at him, I don't know what to make of it, but that was the first moment I knew that what happened to me had impact. And I needed to go share the story, not only about God's grace, about the Red Cross, about the first responder, about this whole experience, because this is a message of hope, and that's what the Red Cross gives. So I appreciate if you support the Red Cross. Billy, I thank you so much. There's a lot more to the story. I'd be more than happy to share when I have more time. But thank you very much for having me in Dallas tonight. I really, truly appreciate it. Thank you very much.